Hey everyone, welcome back to our channel. I'm Yomesh Gupta, and in this video we are going to build a CSS Selector Generation Library. It could be a takeover assignment, it could be a small mini project, it could be a Chrome extension, it could be just a practice question. The possibilities are endless. But it's an interesting problem. Let's see what we have to do here. So the question says that create a library which returns the respective CSS selector of an element when the mouse is hovered upon it. The selector should be unique and short. So if you have a web page and there are multiple elements on the web page, then if we hover the cursor over any element, then it should print its CSS selector. This is similar to what we have in Devtools, where we copy the if we right click on the element, we can copy the selector. This particular use case is important in a lot of products. Like there are multiple products where you can open a website and inject anything, maybe products like Optimizely, where you can drag and drop elements, or modify the elements like Webflow or something, where you have to find the selector. So, and there are multiple ways to solve this question. I'm going to show you one of the ways. It says that the library should be injectable on any web page using the console, and after the injection of the script, whenever there is mouse over on element, its CSS path should be printed on the console. Okay, and it should expose two methods. One is generate selectors to start listening and generate the CSS selector. Okay, and the next one is to stop the generation and remove listener. So let's see the demo of it. So let's say I've created the library. I'll paste it. I create a new instance called generate selectors using this. So I have the selectors. Now if I hover over the login, I get this, and if I copy this and I say document dot query selector all, and I print this, then I'm getting this particular button. So it is giving me a CSS selector. And if I show you a couple of more, maybe I'll show you this premium tutorials. And if I copy this one, I think this was the for the premium tutorials. Again, query selector all, and so it's giving me this particular button. So the idea here, as I mentioned earlier, that if we hover over any element, then it should give us their CSS selector. And if I do i.stop on the instance, then we should stop listening. But the idea here is that in this question, we will talk about problem solving, we'll talk about fundamentals of CSS like classes, tags, IDs, and things like wildcards, nth child, nth of type, and so on. And there are multiple ways to solve this. I'm going to show you one of the ways. It might not be the most optimized one, or might not give you the shortest possible, but it would get the job done. So the idea here is that you will use this solution to maybe optimize it, or to enhance it, or take it as a project, or build a Chrome extension out of it. So without wasting any time, let's get started. So let's build some sort of algorithm first, that what we are going to do in this particular question. So let me close this. Let me paste a dummy HTML structure. So let's say we have this structure where we have HTML body main, inside we have a section and two divs, which are basically same divs, same structure with might be different content or illustrations. Now let's say this image tag is currently our current element, which is hovered upon. Now if we start generation, then you can take two approaches. You can say take a top to bottom approach, or bottom to up approach, or bottom to top approach. Exactly. Now in our case, we will say bottom to top approach, where we will start from the leaf node and we will iterate till the root node. Now we can take this element which is hovered. So if I say image, but there are multiple images, so this is not unique. So we'll move on to its parent. So it would be a dot illustration image. It is still not unique. Then let's move on to its parent, and so on. So what exactly we have to do is that we have to iterate from current element, which is the hovered upon, to the root element. Okay, now we have to find selectors, and selectors could be of, maybe it could be an ID, or it could be a tag name, or it could be a class, or in case multiple classes. Now in case of ID, it could be something like, let's say, hero image, or a tag name, maybe let's say block code. It could be the there is only one block code. And classes could be something like which is mentioned above, illustration. Now how are we going to find these selectors? So we, what we can do is, first we'll find this ID, because ID, in a most ideal way, ID is the, should be only one on the page. Like if there is hero image, then it should be only present once. So we'll say find ID selector, and once we have it, we'll check if the check if should continue, or what we can call is unique selector. If we have that, then we will exit, else we'll find the tag selector, something like a combination of ID plus tag. If we have that, like after this we'll, so after every step we'll check it, like so far have we found the most unique selector. If not, then we'll go for find class selector, and then we will do the same check, ID plus tag plus class, and then the same check here, that should we continue or not. And let's say in our case, if we take, we are on image, so there is no ID, we'll check the tag selector, so we got the image. Now it's not most unique and there are no classes, so we have to move on to the parent. So what we can do is, we can say current element equal to this dot, or in this case current element dot parent element. So that means we'll move on to its parent. In the parent's case, we don't have the ID, we have the tag, so it could be like a div dot illustration. And we, once we have that, so we have the div, and then we'll find the ID classes also, so we can say div dot illustration, and then we'll move on to its more parent until we find the most unique selector. So let's move on to the implementation part. Let's create a class called CSS Selector Generator in this case. Inside this class, let me just change this, use tabs to. So we'll have a constructor. Now we need a way to store all the selectors. So we can say this dot selectors, which would be an array. And we also need to store our current element that is hovered upon, so we can say this dot current element, which would be null for now. And it exposes two methods, like stop and generate selectors. So what we can do here is, so we can create the stop method for now, which is do not, or do something here basically. And we need to for like in the problem it mentioned that it should be able to inject, it should be injectable on any web page. So to not pollute the global namespace, what we can do here is, we can create a ify, and we will pass window here. We get the window here, and we'll move this entire thing inside the ify. So basically ify is immediately invoked function expression. So whenever we put this inside a web page, then it would automatically would be executed, and it will all the name, all the variables, all the classes and functions we create, it will be just limited to this particular ify scope. We will not pollute anything. So you can create a ify, you can create a normal script, host it on a CDN, import it, whatever you feel like. So inside this, what we can do is, we can say generate selector, and this would be a function. Inside this, we can create a new instance of our class. We can say this dot new, and once we create an instance, we can have a initialize function, or what we can do say here is initialize. Initialize, we can say called initialize just to test things out. We can call it from instance dot initialize and will return this instance. I'll show you what's the purpose of all this. So we have this and we have stop. Now when we so when are we in when we initializing, then in an initialization we have to get that element also, but this initialization should only happen, or we can do one more thing. Rather than doing initialize here, we can bind the event handler. So in our constructor only we can say document dot add event listener, and we want to do it on mouse over. Whenever the mouse is over any element, then we can say this dot initialize. But now here comes one part, that we are passing this dot initialize method and to add event listener, and this would be invoked at a later point of time. Now we don't know the invocation context there, so it would be invoked with a global scope whenever, because this is a callback. So what we can do is, to fix this, we can say something like bounded initialize this dot initialize dot bind this. If you don't understand this, so basically what happening here is that we have a callback which we are passing to add event listener. Now add event listener calls this whenever this event happens, then we will call this callback. And now there is no calling context here, so it will be invoked with the global context. And if we are using if we are using this here, then it will refer to the global object, because there is no calling context here. So to avoid this, what we are doing is that we are bounding it, or we are binding it to the class or instance this, that whenever this is going to be invoked, this method, then it should always be invoked with the instance of the CSS selector generator. It should always be invoked with this instance. This is particularly what we are doing. And when we want to remove it, what we can do is that document dot remove event listener on mouse over, and we can pass this bounded initialization just like we want to do here also. Now if we test this, let's say if I copy this much and I come here, I just refresh this page, I print this, so I'll inject this, I'll say this dot generate CSS selectors. Now if I hover, I'm getting called multiple times, and I'm going to different elements. And if I do I dot stop, then we are not getting anything. See, so our basic problem where we have a method which is on the, this is basically on the prototype, you can move it inside. So also one step we can do here is that we can create a private methods or private fields. I am right now not doing that, but you can do that and move this stop in the constructor so that they become the direct properties rather than like a prototype property. Now coming back to our implementation, let's implement our initialize now. So this will going to get the event from the mouse over. Now from the event we need the element that is hovered upon. So one way to get that is, we can say element would be e dot, there is a method called document dot element from point, where client x and e dot client y. So basically from the coordinates we are asking the document that what is the element that is hovered upon. So we'll get that element and we'll say if this element is an instance of HTML element. If we have that, then we will say that this dot current element would be element, and this dot current selectors would be an empty array. Basically we are resetting, so basically we are moving between multiple elements. Then from, let's say if I'm on collections, then I move to resources. So now I will ask the document that from where my cursor is, what is the current element, and from that element, if it's an HTML instance of HTML element, then give it to me. I mean, assign the current element to element, and we'll reset the selectors so that we can compute for this particular hovered upon. And we can say generate CSS selectors. Let's say, let's create a method because we want to generate the selector for this, or not selector, selector. Let's say implement this. So I'll close my initialize, I'll close my stop also, and here I'll create this method. And inside this method, what we want to do, we want to follow our algorithm. That means traverse from current element to root and print the output. These are the two things we want to do. So for traverse, what we can do is that we can create a method called traverse and calculate. So we can say this dot, we will invoke this. Now the algorithm which we wrote here, it mentioned that first we need to find the ID, and then we need to check, and then tag selector and class selector. So let's first start with the ID. So inside my traverse and calculator, I can say this dot calculate ID selector, and I'll create a method here, ID selector. So we need the ID. We can say this dot current element dot ID. Now you can also do this dot current element get attribute ID. That's up to you. Both works in this case. So if we have the ID, then inside our selectors we will push it something like ID. So let's say we are hovering upon something that has an ID of whatever you want to call it, let's say ID of illustration. And if we have that, we'll push it into our selector. So our array here will become something like this. Now once we have that, we need to calculate that have we reached the unique point. If yes, then we need to stop it. So we are calculating the ID selector, but this is for the hovered element. But our algorithm says that we have to traverse. That means we have to somehow loop it, that from current element to the root. So inside our traverse and calculate, what we can do is we can say if while we have this dot current element, then we'll calculate the selectors here. Else what we are going to do is move to the parent. So how can we do that in this case? We can say this dot current element, this dot current element dot parent element. So let's say we don't find anything, or maybe whatever we found, it's not unique, then we'll move on to the parent. So we have the ID, and as per our algorithm, this is the checkpoint where we need to check that should we continue or do we have the unique selector. So to do that, what we are going to do is we will check if this dot is unique selector. If we have that, then we will just return. We will not loop anymore. We will just return. So let's implement this method. So is unique selector. Now we need the selector here right now. So for that, what we can do is that we can create another method called generate selector string, and we will use this here. So in this case, in generate selector string, we can say there could be multiple cases. Let's say we initially call it where our array is empty. So we'll add the check or the guardrail condition that if this dot selectors dot length, if we don't have that, then we will just return maybe an empty string. Else we will return this dot selectors dot to reversed, we'll call it, and then we'll join by a space and return it. Now here lies another question, why I am using to reversed, and first of all why I'm even reversing, and the second question is that why to reverse and not something like reversed. There could be both the methods, why to reverse not reversed, and why reverse at all. So you can pause and think about this and mention your answer in the comments, or just write it down and then match it with my answer. So let me talk about it here. So why, first of all, why reverse at all? So when we start from the root element, we'll push it. So let's say our initially we have an ID. So let's say illustration, and let's assume that this is not the unique one. So we'll move on to the parent. So to the parent, let's say there is another ID which is called container. Now when we are checking on the checkpoint, then we have two elements here. Now we have two elements here, but ideally the final selector should be something like container and illustration, because in our selectors parents, the parent element comes first and the child element. That is why we are reversing, because we are pushing in the array and then we are reversing. Now the point comes in, why to reverse not reversed, because reversed is a mutating function, mutating higher order function. So basically if I call reversed here, then it will mutate the this dot selectors element itself, it will reverse it, which I don't want. If I want to mutate my class element, or in this case class field, then I will explicitly do it like something like shift pop if I want to do that. But in this case I want to keep it pure, so that's why I'm using this new method called to reverse, which is going to reverse the array and give me a new array. So I don't want to reverse in place. That's the reason here. So once we have that, once we have the selector, we will check that let's say if we don't even have the selector, so we can just return false, because if it returns an empty string, else what we can do is that we can say document dot query selector all, the selector length equal to 1. So now if we come back here, what we are doing is first we'll calculate the ID, we'll push it the ID into the selectors array, then we'll check if it is at the checkpoint if we have collected enough selectors that make a unique combination. So we go to unique selector, we generate our selector string, which we do that by reversing the array and joining them with a space. Then we come back here, if we don't have the selector, then it is false because it's not unique. Else we'll just query it on the DOM, and if whatever collection we return, if the array length or the collection length is 1, that means we have the only one element, so it's unique, so we'll return true. Now we completed the part in our algorithm where we have calculated the ID and done this checkpoint. Now we come to line number 40 where we'll have tag selector and class selector. We'll combine these two. So let's see how can we do that. So to do that, we will come to our method. We'll say this dot calculate tag selector, or tag and class selector, and we'll create this method. So we will create it here, let's say. So first we need the tag, so we can have a tag name which would be this dot current element dot tag name, to lowercase, because if you check any element then their tag names are given in uppercase, div, html, p, and so on. So we are just making it into smaller case. Now we need so there could be multiple ways here, like let's say a tag could be like a block code which is only one on the page, or we could have something like that there is a main tag and inside this we have multiple you know tags. So let's say if we want to find this div, so it could be something like div of nth child, uh, 2 in this case, nth of child 2. So that means we need siblings, and using those siblings we will calculate this index. So to find the siblings, first we need the parent, so we can say parent this dot current element dot parent element, and then we find the siblings. We can, if we have the parent, then array from, or you can spread it also, parent dot children. I'm just create, so because array parent dot children is HTML collection, I'm just converting into an array, so that maybe we might want to mutate it in some way. Then we have also we can have something like there could be multiple divs, so all the children of the same type, so we can say same type same tag siblings maybe. So if we have parent, then we can say parent get element by tag name. If it's, I'm not sure if it's get elements or get element, let me check. Document dot get element by tag name, yeah, it's get elements. So if, because we are not using document here, because within the parent, within main, we want to find all the siblings with the same type or same tag, so we'll pass the tag name here, else it would be an empty array. So now let's see the multiple conditions that we might have here. So we need to compute, so we'll create a tag selector. Let me just scroll it a bit up. So this variable will store all the final selector from this function. So if our same tag siblings length is equal to 1, then our tag selector should or could simply be just the tag name. So this is the case where, let's say inside our main we have just one p tag, one div tag, or multiple p tags and multiple h1 or something like that. We have just one div. So in this case we don't need to do anything else, we will just pick up the tag name. Okay, and we can extend this condition to handle elements which we know would be unique, like something like in this case what we can do is, let me push it to multiple lines to make it more readable. Something like if the tag name is equal to body, or if the tag name is equal to HTML. So in this case what would happen is that uh, we will just pick the tag name, because HTML and body would be unique. Now the another case would be that if siblings dot length is greater than 1. So in this case, let's say we have multiple div tags in here and multiple p tags, and we want to pick this is currently hovered upon, so we'll find the index of it. We can say index would be uh, siblings dot index of this dot current element, and we'll increase it by 1. So basically if we find 0, then we'll make it 1, because that's the position it there is for that particular current element. And our tag selector in this case would become something like tags name nth child, and where we have the index, we don't need this. So what we are doing here basically is that we are saying that find div nth of child 2, so something like this. Now there are multiple cases here, or multiple ways to handle it. Right now we are finding it inside all the siblings. We can easily use same tag siblings here rather than siblings, and we can do something like div nth of type maybe 1 or something like that. So if I explain what's happening here is what's the difference between nth child and nth of type. Now when we say div nth child 2, that means consider all the siblings of the parent and find the div element that is at the second position. Let me repeat. Consider all the children of the parent element and find the div element that is at second position. But in this case, when say nth of type, we say consider the children of the parent that is of type div, like we will just consider this one and this one, and which is present at the first position. So in this case we will consider the sample size would be div h1 div and so on, and in this case it would be just div and div. Ideally this is more specific and this might be more optimized, but we'll see if that makes a difference. Our else case would be the tag selector would be just simply the tag name. So now we have the tag name. We can do one thing. We can check if we have the unique tag name so far. So we can push the tag name or tag selector in this case, and we'll say if this dot is unique selector, then we'll just return it. This is the case. So what I'm doing here is, let's say I find I have something like HTML, then body, then main, and then something like h1. Now h1, usually as per the guidelines there should be only one h1 on the page. So if we find h1 and we push it into the tag selector, now maybe as a combination this is giving me something like body main h1, or so this is unique. So in that case we are just saying if this is unique, or the unique could be h1 only itself, we don't need classes or anything. So we'll check and we'll return. But if it is not unique, then we can say selectors.pop, we'll remove it and we'll do the class generation here. So what we can do is we can say const class selector, and we'll say this dot get class selector, maybe something like that. Now we need this method, so let me close this. We need to find the classes first in this case. So we can say this dot not this dot current element dot class name. So basically this is going to give us like a string, which could be, let's say there is a button with button class primary flex 2 pd p0 something of that sort. There are like 10,000 classes or whatever. So we'll get the class string here, and there could be no class at all, so we'll have add the guardrails. In that case we'll just return an empty string. Now we need to filter and clean out these classes, so we can say valid classes, this dot get valid class names, and we'll pass the classes here. So we need a filtered and unique version. So how can we do that? We'll create this method get valid class names. We have the classes here. So basically what we want to do is that, let's say if we have button primary flex a9 or p0 and whatever, let's say there is a mistake and user have added it multiple times, so we will just remove them or find all the unique ones, clean them and return an array which would give us like the most unique ones, like button in this case, or primary, and so on. So we'll have an array, we'll need the unique one, so we'll use a set new set classes, and in this case we will just split them by space, and we will just spread it, and we can also filter. So let me just format the document. So this will give us all the valid class names, and we get that. Now we have this array button primary comma flex 9 and so on. Now we need to find, so there could be, now we can do a lot of permutation combination here, like button and something like dot button dot primary might be the most unique one, or it could be something like dot primary dot flex 9 could be the most unique one, or it could be a combination of all the classes. So I'll keep it simple for now, and we will just try to add all the classes and see if we find a unique list. So we can say let classes so far, which would be an empty string, we will loop it, let I equal to 0, I less than valid classes dot length, and in this case I plus plus. So classes so far would be, we'll add the current class. So basically it would currently become dot button. If it is most unique, if is unique selector, and we'll pass the classes so far. If it is unique, then we'll return it, else we'll return an empty string. So this method right now doesn't take any argument. So if we come here, so we can say we can make it selector, we can do it something like to check, and we'll pass this selector here. If we don't have to check, then we'll return false, else we'll just say something like this. So we can reuse that method. If we have the selector, when we will use it, else we'll compute the entire string. We come here, we check. So if I explain now, what happening here is that, like I mentioned, initially it could be dot button, we check it. If we don't have it, then in the next iteration, or it's not unique, in the next iteration we'll do dot button slash primary. If it's still not unique, maybe dot button dot primary dot flex 9 and so on, till we exhaust all the classes, then we return it. And so we have the classes here, class selector. So we will push this now. So in our selectors, what we are going to do is push tag selector and then class selector. So this would become something like, let's say li nth child 3 dot list item. This would give us something like this. Now if we check our algorithm, what we talked about here, we said that we have to find id, then we have to check, then tag selector and class selector, and then we have to check. So we are missing the check here. We'll copy this and we'll paste it here. So we are finding the id, then we are checking it. Now we are finding the tag selector and class selector, and then we are checking. If it's unique, then we'll return it, else we'll move on to the parent. So our traverse part is done. Now let's just console log it to see if everything is working fine. So we'll say this dot generate selector string. What was the name? I'm forgetting. Yeah, selector string. I'll just call it here. So let's see if we have implemented it correctly. I haven't tested it, I just wrote it in one go. So I'll come here, I'll just refresh this page, I'll paste this, and let's clear this now. I'll say I dot generate selectors, or it would be selectors or selector, I don't know, selectors. So if I'm hovering, then it's giving me this span and button. So if I take this, and if I say document dot query selector all, yeah, it's giving me just single item. Let me check for a couple of more. So let's say maybe this button. So this is div span. I'll copy this, I'll say document dot query selector selector all. Yeah, it's giving me one element. And if I say child hero, then document dot query selector all, it's giving me only one element. So it's working for the most part. If I do I dot stop, then it stopped listening now. So if we check, if we summarize, what we did here is that we just started from the current element. We took a bottom to top approach. We traversed till root. We found all the selectors. I first we started with ID, then we checked that if we have the unique one, then with tag name, then we checked, then a classes, then we check, and else will move on to the parent part. Now, one thing I would like to call out is that this is one of the ways to solve it. It's not the most optimized way, maybe, or it's giving you, like if we saw, like it's giving you like a big selector sometimes. As per the solution, it is giving you the shortest, because we try to limit the tag name, we try to limit the classes. But it could be, you can do it, play it around. Maybe what I did was that I took tag name first. You can take, compute classes first and see if the classes part is taking care of the uniqueness. If that's taking care of that, you don't need to compute the tag name at all. So it's up to you. Now the idea here was to give a base so that you can use this code or this video, and build maybe a small project out of it, or maybe pick a Chrome extension like this, or maybe build a functionality where if we click on this element, then I can copy the CSS selector like we have in the Devtools. Or the possibilities are endless. It's up to you. So this is the end of the video. I hope you were able to learn something new today. This was an interesting and fun, challenging problem. And I showed you one of the ways. I am looking forward to all the solutions that you come up with. Please do mention in the comments, share the links with me over social media or in the YouTube comments. If you feel that I missed out on something or could have done something better, then please do mention your feedback in the comments. And as always, do like, share, and subscribe. It motivates me to do more. If you like, if you like, or if you see any value in the videos I'm making, then please do share them on the social platforms. It would really help bring awareness to the content. So till next time, see you, take care, bye bye.